My phone was at 4% when my sister-in-law, Tara, pulled into the driveway and told me she needed just a quick favor. I should have known then. 4% battery and a woman who had never once done anything quick in her life. My husband, Scott, was at work. Our daughter, Poppy, was 14 months old and teething, which meant she'd been up most of the night before, which meant I'd been up most of the night before, which meant I was running on about 3 hours of sleep and a gas station coffee that had gone cold before I'd finished half of it. That was my Tuesday. Tara walked in without knocking, she never knocked, and set her purse down on my kitchen counter like she lived there. She was Scott's younger sister, 26, and she had this way of moving through spaces that weren't hers like they were. Like the floor plan had been arranged for her convenience specifically. I just need to borrow your car for a couple hours, she said, already eyeing my keys on the hook by the door. Mine's in the shop. I was holding Poppy on my hip, bouncing her gently because if I stopped, she'd start crying again. My back hurt. My eyes hurt. My car, a silver Honda Pilot that I'd had since before Scott and I got married, that I'd paid for with money I'd saved working double shifts at the hospital, was sitting in the driveway with a full tank of gas because I had a pediatrician appointment in Tuesday. I can't, I said. Poppy has her 12-month checkup today. It's rescheduled from last month. I can't move it again. Tara tilted her head. She had this look she did sometimes, something between a smile and a wince, like she was about to say something she'd already decided she had every right to say. It's just a checkup, she said. Can't you Uber? With a baby and a diaper bag and a car seat, people do it. I looked at her. Actually looked at her for a second, the way you look at someone when you're checking whether they're being serious. She was. Tara, I need my car. She picked up my keys anyway. I'm not even sure she processed what I'd said. She just picked them up, turned them over in her hand and said, I'll have it back by noon. You won't even need to leave until 1. The appointment was at 11. I said that. I told her the appointment was at 11. She made a face like I'd said something inconvenient instead of something factual. Can you just reschedule? I really need to get across town, and there's no Uber availability right now, and the shop said my car won't be done until Thursday, and give me my keys back, Tara. I said it quietly. I wasn't yelling. Poppy was right there on my hip, and she startles when there's sudden noise, and honestly, I was too tired to yell. I just held out my hand. Tara looked at my hand, then she looked at me. Then she set the keys back on the counter, not in my hand, on the counter, and said, you know what, fine, I'll figure it out, but I'm going to tell Scott you wouldn't help me. Then she left. I stood there in my kitchen for a second, Poppy chewing on the collar of my shirt, and I thought, that's it? That's the whole thing? She leaves and it's done? It was not done. Scott called on his lunch break. Tara says you wouldn't lend her the car. I was buckling Poppy into her car seat when he called, which required approximately 4 hands, and I had 2, so I was already at a deficit. I had Poppy's appointment, I said. I told her that. She said you could have rescheduled. Scott, it's already been rescheduled once. The pediatrician's office have you to a schedule limit before they drop you from the schedule. We talked about this. Silence. Not the silence of someone thinking, the silence of someone who had already decided something and was just figuring out how to say it. She's my sister, he said. I know she's your sister, you could have been more flexible. I closed the car door gently, because Poppy, and stood in the driveway in the October sun, and I said, I had my daughter's doctor appointment. That's not inflexible. That's called having a schedule. He made a sound that wasn't quite a word. Then he said he'd talk to me when he got home. He didn't come home until 7:30. By then I'd been to the appointment alone, which had gone fine except Poppy screamed through the whole thing, and the pediatrician noted she might be hitting her molars early, which explained the nights. I'd gotten home, made dinner, given Poppy a bath, gotten her to bed. I'd eaten standing at the counter. I was cleaning up when Scott walked in and said, without saying hello first, can we talk? We talked. Or rather, he talked. About how Tara was having a hard time lately. About how her boyfriend had just broken up with her and she was struggling. And why couldn't I just try a little harder to be supportive? About how his family had always been the kind that helped each other out. I let him finish. I had spent 14 years learning how to wait for Scott to finish. Then I said, when Poppy was colicky and I hadn't slept more than 2 hours in a stretch for 3 weeks, I asked Tara to come over for one afternoon so I could sleep. She said she was busy. So I don't need a lecture from you about being supportive of your sister. Scott's jaw tightened. That's different, he said. Tell me how. He didn't tell me how. What I want you to understand, what I didn't understand at the time, not clearly, is that this wasn't really about the car. The car was just the most recent thing. There was a shape to it, the pattern of it, that I could see only later when I had enough distance to look back. Scott's family had always operated on a kind of unspoken assumption that my resources, my time, my car, my money, my energy were available to them and that choosing not to offer them was a form of selfishness. Meanwhile, Scott's resources were Scott's. His paycheck was their money in the sense that we both had access to it, but the decisions around it were his. My paycheck from the hospital went into our joint account, and from there it was just household. But anything I owned before we got married somehow remained in this grey zone where it was technically mine but available upon request. I had let it go, mostly, the small things, his mother borrowing my casserole dish and returning it 8 months later with a crack in it, Tara asking to borrow my KitchenAid stand mixer and keeping it for so long I had to go to her apartment to get it back, Scott volunteering my weekend to help his parents move without asking me first, small things. I let them go because it felt easier and because I loved Scott and because I genuinely thought, that this was what marriage looked like. Compromise and accommodation and picking your battles. But here's the thing about small things, they compound, and the car thing lit something in me. I'm not sure exactly what, but something. I started keeping notes, nothing dramatic, just a running document on my phone, dates and incidents, not because I had a plan, just because I suddenly needed to see it laid out somewhere. I needed to know I wasn't imagining it. By the time I reached the 3rd page, I called my mom. My mom answered on the 2nd ring. She always does. I told her about the car, I told her about Scott, I told her about the KitchenAid and the casserole dish and the weekend and the 3 pages of notes. I did not cry. I was past the crying part. I'd done that alone in the bathroom the night before while Scott slept. My mom listened to all of it without interrupting, which is a skill she has that not everyone appreciates fully until they need it. When I finished, she said, "What do you want to do? Not here's what you should do, not have you considered. Just what do you want?" "I don't know yet," I said. "I just needed you to know." "Okay," she said, "I'm here. But I want you to think about something. How long have you been keeping a running document? About 2 weeks. And how long before that were things like this happening?" I thought about it. 3 years, I said. "Maybe 4. Okay," she said again. "Call me when you know what you want." I called her back 4 days later. What I wanted, I realized, was not to blow up my marriage. I loved Scott. I was angry at Scott, frustrated at Scott, disappointed in Scott in the way you can only be disappointed in someone you had specific hopes for, but I loved him. What I wanted was for him to see it, the pattern of it, the way his family moved through our life, and he opened the door every time. So I told him I wanted to go to couples counseling. He agreed, which surprised me. He said he thought we were fine, but if I wanted to go, we could go. We went. The therapist's name was Dr. Yoon. She was calm in the way that only people who have spent years listening to other people's worst moments can be calm. Not indifferent, just steady. She had a way of asking one question and then waiting very quietly while you figured out what the honest answer was. After 3 sessions, she asked Scott a question I hadn't thought to ask him myself. She said, when you say she needed the car, what did you feel when your wife said no to her? Scott thought about it, really thought, which was something he didn't always do in real time. Embarrassed, he said finally, of your wife, of the situation, like there was conflict and I want it to go away. Dr. Yoon nodded. And how do you usually make conflict in your family go away? Another pause. I smooth it over, Scott said. I make the other person apologize or give in or... He stopped. Finish that. I make the other person accommodate. He looked at me when he said that, not with any dramatic revelation on his face. Just, he looked at me. And I looked back. It didn't change overnight. I want to be clear about that because I think stories like this, the ones people share online, the ones that get passed around, they tend to have a very clean moment where everything shifts and then the shift holds. That's not how it works. Or it wasn't how it worked for us. There were still dinners with his family where I sat and smiled and felt invisible. There were still moments where Scott defaulted back to the old pattern where he'd say something like she's just trying and I'd have to breathe through my response instead of my first instinct. But something had changed in him. A crack in the certainty. He started noticing things he hadn't noticed before, or maybe that he'd chosen not to notice. The way his mother would talk to me versus the way she talked to him. The way Tara would phrase requests, never really asking, always sort of announcing. The way every holiday centered on what his family wanted, their location, their timing, their traditions, with mine folded in as an afterthought. He started naming it sometimes. Little moments where he'd say, "That was unfair to you," without me prompting it. They were small, but they weren't nothing. The real shift happened 4 months into therapy, Thanksgiving. The plan had always been, Scott's family's plan, that we would do Thanksgiving at his parents' house. Every year, that was just what we did. My parents lived about 40 minutes away and my mom had mentioned, casually, not pushing, that she'd love for us to do Thanksgiving with them this year. Even just part of the day, I told Scott. He said, maybe we could do dessert with your parents after. 2 hours of driving for dessert after a full day at his family's house. I didn't fight it then, but I brought it to therapy. Dr. Yoon asked Scott, how would you feel if the situation were reversed and every major holiday was at your wife's family home and your parents got the 2-hour dessert slot? He sat with that for a while. I'd feel like an afterthought, he said. Yes, she said. And I'd resent it eventually. Has your wife ever expressed resentment to you about this? He looked at me. Yeah, he said quietly, she has. That Thanksgiving, we did the first half of the day at my parents'. Full dinner, the whole thing. It was the first major holiday in 4 years of marriage that I'd spent with my own family for more than a few hours. My mom made her cornbread stuffing. My dad did the turkey. My little brother, who was in his last year of college, showed up with his girlfriend and a pecan pie from a bakery that was objectively too good for something he could afford on a student budget. We sat around the table and nobody talked about real estate prices or who got what raise or the right way to make gravy. We just ate and talked, and my mom kept refilling everyone's glass before they asked. I cried in the car on the way to Scott's parents' house, not sad crying, the other kind. Scott reached over and held my hand on the gear shift. I'm sorry it took me this long, he said. I didn't say it was okay because I'm not in the business of saying things I don't mean. But I held his hand back. Here's the part I think about now. In December, about 6 weeks after Thanksgiving, Tara texted me, not Scott. Me. She said she wanted to take me to coffee, just to talk. I went because I believe in giving people chances, and because my therapist had mentioned something about allowing space for others to grow, and because I was curious. We met at a place near her apartment. She ordered an oat milk latte. I ordered black coffee because I'd been up since 5 with Poppy. She said, I know things have been weird. I said, okay. She said, I think I've been kind of, not great, to you. For a while. I waited. The car thing, she said. I shouldn't have done that. Like, I knew you had the appointment. I get in my shed sometimes and I make it about me, and I'm trying to work on that. This was not the apology of someone whose family member had sat them down and given them a script. I'd been expecting that. This was something more fumbling and more real. I told her I appreciated her saying that. I meant it. Then I said, can I tell you something and you hear it without defending yourself? She nodded. A little warily, but she nodded. I felt for most of the time I've been married to your brother like I was a guest in your family. Welcome enough, but always provisional. Like my stuff and my time and my plans were available resources, but I wasn't really part of the core thing. And I know that's not any one moment, it's a lot of moments, and it's going to take time to shift. But I need you to know that's what it's felt like. Tara was quiet. She stirred her latte. She didn't get defensive or tear up or do anything that made it about her. That's fair, she said finally. I think you're right. We sat there for a minute, not talking, which was different from the silence I was used to with Scott's family. This was the silence of two people actually thinking about what had just been said. Can we try again, she asked. Like, actually try. Not just not fighting. Yeah, I said, I think we can. I'm not telling you this because everything is perfect now. It's not. There are still things Scott and I are working through, still sessions with Dr. Yoon, still moment where I have to remind myself that change is slow and not linear, and that 2 steps forward followed by 1 step back is still net progress. But here's what I know. I know that the day I didn't hand over my keys, the day I said no to a small thing because I had a real reason and I was tired and my daughter needed her appointment, that was the beginning of something. Not the beginning I planned. I didn't have a plan. I was just a woman who hadn't slept enough, standing in her kitchen with a teething baby on her hip saying, I need my car. It's a small sentence. It's such a small sentence. But I think that's where it starts sometimes. Not with a big confrontation or an ultimatum or a dramatic moment that everyone photographs and posts about. Just with someone quietly saying, this is mine, and I need it. My mom called me the week after Thanksgiving to ask how I was doing. Better, I told her. Really? She didn't say I told you so. That's not what she does. She said, I'm glad you called me when you did. Poppy was on the floor next to me, chewing on a board book about dinosaurs, completely unconcerned with everything. 14 months old and already destroying property with complete serenity. I told my mom I'd call her Sunday. Then I sat down on the floor next to my daughter and I watched her demolish that dinosaur book, and I thought, we're going to be okay. I was right.